It's time for Recipe of the Day. There are a lot of meatloaf recipes on my site, thecookful.com, and so I get a lot of questions from readers about meatloaf. And the recipe I'm telling you about today came about because of one of those questions from a reader. They wanted to know if they could make meatloaf using just 1 pound of ground meat. And the answer is yes. And it's actually my preferred way to do it because it's a smaller loaf. And that means that it doesn't have to be in the oven for as long. So it's more convenient, but also it means the outside isn't drying out by the time the inside cooks through. You see what I mean? Now, if it's not enough for you, if you need more than 1 pound of meat to feed your family, that is totally fine. You can do 2 or 3 or 4 of them side by side on a baking sheet. And as long as there's a couple of inches around them, like separating them, then you can cook them for the exact same amount of time. Nothing has to change. You just divide up the meat once you've made the mixture and shape them into those individual 1 pound loaves. Okay. So what do? Preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you're lining a baking sheet with parchment paper or foil. So I don't do my meatloaf in a loaf pan. I find that it kind of ends up like simmering in the fat in there in a way that I don't like. And I do like the texture of the outside of the meatloaf when it kind of darkens a little bit. So when it's more exposed to the heat from being on a baking sheet instead of in a loaf pan, you get a little bit more of that. Okay, then you get out a big bowl and to it you add a tablespoon of barbecue sauce, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, a half teaspoon each of garlic powder, onion powder, and salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and 1 egg lightly beaten. And you mix that all up. Now, I like to do this. I've told you this before. I like to mix up all the seasonings in the egg before adding the meat so that I know that that is thoroughly mixed. Then when I add the meat in, I don't have to mix it as much to know that all the various spices and things are evenly distributed, right? So that is just a great technique to not have to work the meat as much. So I mix that up. Then you add your 1 pound of lean ground beef on top of that, and then pour a 1/4 cup of dry breadcrumbs, just regular dry breadcrumbs on there, and then mix that up just until it looks like the breadcrumbs are worked through evenly and the seasonings kind of look like they've mixed through. Then you transfer that to your baking sheet, just kind of plop it down in the middle and shape it into about a 6-inch by 3-inch loaf. It'll be about 1.5 inches high, and you just kind of like smoosh it together because you want this to hold together after it's cooked, right? So push from all sides, push around, and then you're going to brush the top and the sides with another tablespoon of barbecue sauce, and that goes into your 350 Fahrenheit oven for 30 minutes. I will say I like to put a probe thermometer in there before it goes in the oven right into the middle so that I can monitor the temperature and know when it's ready exactly, because we don't want to overcook it. We definitely don't want to undercook it, right? But you don't want to leave it in there just because I've said how long to cook it. You leave it in that long and oh no, yours was a little hotter oven or whatever is going on. It cooked more quickly. Now you've got a drier meatloaf, right? So put your probe thermometer in there, the kind that is safe to leave in when it goes in the oven, and it's cooking for 30 minutes at first. And then you take it out, no matter what temperature it's at this point, and you brush it with another tablespoon of barbecue sauce. And that's just adding more flavor, a little bit of moisture on there. And then you're cranking the heat up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. That's going to give a little bit of darkness and crust to the outside of the meatloaf, caramelize that last bit of barbecue sauce, right? And that is staying in there until your temperature says 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's about 8 to 12 minutes more. And then you're taking it out. Now, 160 is not actually the safe temperature for ground beef. It's 165, but we are crucially resting this meatloaf for at least 7 minutes. 10 minutes is great. That is going to raise that temperature up at least those last 5 degrees, possibly even a little bit higher. And what is most important is resting it stops the liquid from inside the meat from like all simmering around in there so that when you slice into it, it doesn't just fall apart. So you want it to just cool, like not cold. It's still going to be hot, but you don't want it to be like crazy hot like it was when you first took it out of the oven. So just let it sit there on the pan, 7 to 10 minutes. And then you're going to use like a metal spatula to get under it. I actually use 2 of them, one at either end. Lift that onto a cutting board and slice into 6 slices. You could maybe get 7, but if you go too thin, it's going to fall apart. So I think 6 is best. And that is how you make a 1 pound meatloaf. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is July 14th of 2025. The other place you can get the recipe is in our Facebook group. I post the recipe of the day link in there every single day, so you can always find what I'm talking about and find something to inspire you about what you can make that day or in the days ahead. That group is at facebook.com/groups/recipeotd. I look forward to seeing you there. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.